Everyone, and welcome to this morning's Planning Committee. As you can see, we are meeting in person this morning because legislation doesn't allow us to meet virtually. We will come back to that item further down the agenda. This is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decisions have been made in advance. The members of the committee sit here as representatives of the whole council and not as ward councillors, and we don't enjoy parliamentary style privilege when we speak, so you do have to watch what you're saying, particularly if you don't like an application before us. Moving then to the agenda, the notice of recording and webcast. This meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, which is impossible to read out as it's a string of about 20 letters and numbers, but going to YouTube and looking for Birmingham City Council YouTube meetings should get you there. And members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items, of which I don't believe we have any today. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's the standard declarations of interest paragraphs for all BCC meetings. In addition, you will see members withdraw from discussion of certain applications where they have previously expressed a view on the item before us. And again, that will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Item 3 is apologies. Councillor Moore.
Chair, just on the declaration of interest, just to make it clear that I've objected to item 8, so I will be withdrawing at that point in the agenda. And also just a public record, I have been contacted in relation to item 6, as it's in my ward, which I've not expressed any opinions on it.
Thank you. And while we're on the subject, item 7 is in my ward, and I've not expressed a view on that application. Apologies then. I have apologies from Councillors Griffiths, Johnson White and Straker Wells, and I think everybody else is in the room. Chair's announcements. Our next meetings are on the 23rd of December and the 6th and 20th of January. And as I mentioned, how we go forward with those meetings is something we'll come back to under other urgent business. Item 5 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of November. Can we agree those as a correct record? Thank you. And I should have said under item 4 that item 6 has been withdrawn from today's agenda in consultation with the applicants. People who'd intended to speak have been notified of this, and it will be back hopefully for our next meeting, but certainly in the near future. Which means that the first application we're looking at today is item 7, which is 8 Selly Hill Road in Selly Oak. Andrew, any updates on this one?
No updates at all, thank you.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak on this one? Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. I was slightly surprised when reading the report because obviously within the objections is the University of Birmingham itself, and they object on the grounds that the area is oversaturated with purpose-built student accommodation. So I'm not entirely sure how this falls with keeping 30 regarding student accommodation, because clearly there has to be a need for student accommodation. And the university that such accommodation would serve is objected on the basis that there's an oversaturation. How is that need being met in policy? I don't understand how that logic works, because the university clearly built the support, and therefore we should not be supporting, particularly given that there's a need to deliver actually brand new houses.
I believe it's the first time we've had such an objection, complicated by the fact, of course, this is a tweak to an existing consent. Andrew, can you give us some more information on that?
Yes, I think the key thing to emphasise is that we've already granted permission for 178 on this site, which they could start building tomorrow. So we're talking about 4 additional units, which is a tiny number. I think it's also important to remember that on the recent appeal decision at the Selly Oak Triangle, the inspector accepted there was a need for further purpose-built accommodation, and that was over 1,000 in that case.
I think it's something we need to explore further, but on this particular application, I think we need to listen to Andrew's explanation. Councillor Stanford.
I actually have the pleasure of students' drama performance in the old site, which I know the previous application was demolished. So, whilst I'm sad that I do appreciate that there is a need for more accommodation, my only real concern is that with the previous application being granted and this application being fairly similar with the addition of 4 beds, they're setting up precedent that an additional 4 beds can be applied for in a relatively process and growing in size.
I think every application needs to be dealt on its own individual merits, and it will come down to whether any harm arises from the 4 or however many additional units. And in this case, there is no harm arising from that small increase.
Anyone else wish to speak on this one? Are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour of the application? And those against? I make that 8 in favour and 2 against. So that is approved. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Mike. I've got my numbers before Councillor Stanford came in. So 8-2-1 on that. It's still approved. And we will follow up on that point, Councillor Moore. Okay, so that was it for the south. We're moving on to the city centre. And I should say at this point, if you're looking at the agenda, items 10 and 11 relate to the same property, and we will take those together, but vote on them separately. Councillor Moore has left, so we are back to 10 people. Item 8 is the site bordered by Gooch Street North, Kent Street and Lower Essex Street. And when you're ready, can we have the updates, please?
A few updates for members. First of all, from the conditions section at the end of the report, we're removing condition 12 and condition 19 as they're not considered to be necessary. Secondly, at 8.4 in the report, after the recommendation, there should be added the words, or such later date as may be authorised by officers under delegated powers. And finally, we have 2 late objections, which I'd like to summarise for you. The first is on behalf of the operators of the Nightingale Club and the Fox. And in summary, they state the following. The City Council has been involved in facilitating agent of change discussions between the Nightingale and the developer of 16 Kent Street. Those negotiations are now well advanced and involve planning conditions precluding occupation until the satisfactory resolution of noise mitigation measures, not only at the new development, but also in the form of works at the Nightingale itself, which will be reflected in a Section 106 agreement currently under consideration. The Council is on record with the view that noise mitigation works for the Nightingale are a necessity, and has indicated that it will insist upon a control mechanism to secure the works in a timely manner. Any derogation from these commitments by the council would be likely to result in a legal challenge by the Nightingale. Regulatory Services response reflects that non-opening windows is not considered to be a satisfactory mitigation measure for noise in light of the impact it has upon residential amenity. Numerous previous council decisions attest to this approach, and the council is expected to act consistently. The mitigation at the Nightingale will have no effect on noise from the Fox. Regulatory Services recommended refusal, and the Fox is clearly referenced. These are matters that need to be discussed and resolved as between the Nightingale, the Fox, the developer at 16 Kent Street, and the current applicant. These matters must move to a satisfactory resolution that could be reflected in conditions and a Section 106 agreement, possibly together with a deed of easement, to safeguard the same interests that the City Council has already committed to with regard to the Nightingale. The City Council is now establishing an impressive reputation in using the agent of change principle to protect its valuable community assets and harmonise new development in continued beneficial coexistence with new residential development. The committee is respectfully invited to act in accordance with the commitments already given and to facilitate the agent of change principle, which depends upon finding an acceptable solution to the protection of these entertainment premises before any planning permission can be granted. The second objection is from Councillor Gareth Moore, and again, in summary, object due to the impact on the Nightingale and the Fox. Whilst an agent of change agreement is in place for the development at 16 Kent Street to help provide better noise mitigation for the Nightingale, the recommendation does not sufficiently address the possibility that this development may be completed prior to 16 Kent Street and would allow this developer to renege on any mitigation, leaving the Nightingale at severe risk of complaints from future occupiers about noise nuisance. The report suggests that mitigation for the Fox is not needed and future occupiers can close their windows at noisy times. This has been shown time and again to not to be an effective form of mitigation, with a number of LGBT venues, including the Loft, Missing and Sidewalk, being subject to noise complaints from neighbouring residents who were not willing to close their windows. Providing residential accommodation adjacent to a late night entertainment venue will generate complaints and should be avoided. If there is not a suitable form of mitigation, then the application should be refused. There is no onus on the developer to ensure that future occupiers are aware that they will be living next to a late night entertainment venue. Should the committee be minded to approve the application, the Section 106 agreement includes an affordable housing provision equivalent to almost £1.5 million. Given the recent homophobic violence, this money could be put to better use by enabling better street lighting and CCTV, which has been asked for by members of the LGBT community. I would ask that the Section 106 agreement be amended so that this contribution could be better used to protect a community under attack. Thank you, Chair. I'd be grateful if you'd just let me clarify a couple of points that have been raised by the objectors. First of all, developers have agreed to undertake soundproofing works to the Nightingale as per the application at 16 Kent Street. An agent of change agreement will be required, and the Nightingale have agreed to work with the developer in principle, and that's explained at paragraphs 6.24 and 6.25 of the report. Works to the Nightingale will be secured before the occupation of the development. Mitigation for noise from the Fox is proposed via the building envelope, i.e. the building and the glare, for the reasons given at 6.30 and 6.31 of the report. And finally, future occupiers and purchasers would be advised of the late night venues in the area and the noise mitigation measures by an informative added to the decision notice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak to this item? I should say that these two objections that came in late, clearly in response to the report, though it's not very helpful to receive them so late, and they were presented to me certainly after the closing date for speaking, so we hadn't heard from the objectors or a response from the applicants. Councillor Suleiman.
Just on that, like you mentioned, obviously, considering that there is still objections and there's unresolved sort of discussion between the developer and these particular venues, whether it would be possible to defer this application until discussions have been taken place, but I don't know if that's possible.
Have I got a seconder for that? Councillor Booth has seconded that. Do you want to add anything, or Julie, do you want to add anything before I take a vote?
Sure. Just to clarify, the Nightingale is one situation where there is an agent of change, or there would be an agent of change agreement in place. The Fox is slightly different insofar as we believe it's got a different character to the Nightingale Club. The licensing hours are different. The space where people would congregate is to the rear of the building, the three-storey building that would provide screening in itself from the application site we have in front of us. So the mitigation for noise is by way of the development itself. However, if members feel that would not be sufficient, then there is the chance that the applicants could go and speak to the Fox and ascertain whether an agent of change agreement would be on the table.
Okay. So my understanding is, looking at the report, that in terms of the Nightingale, the mitigation measures that we've already agreed as regards the Kent Street development will suffice to deal with the issue. The way that the recommendation is worded is that if those works to the Nightingale are carried out by the agent of change agreement that's in place for that other development, then the Section 106 contributions will go in another direction for this development. But if this development comes on stream first, then this development will deal with those agents of change principles for the Nightingale. So it's whichever one is developed first will pay for it. And in both cases, we've got provisions that if it's not required, that will go in different directions. As regards the Fox, we're saying that this application contains sufficient measures to deal with the noise issue from the Fox. So I think our view is that a deferral won't actually change things. So that's why we're saying that we don't think a deferral is necessary.
Okay, so I've got a motion to defer to allow further discussion. That's both between ourselves and the applicant and the objectors. Can I see those in favour? Any against? Abstentions? I have 9 in favour of deferral and 1 abstention. That is accordingly deferred for those further discussions. Thank you. Thanks, Julia. I think Julia is retrieving Councillor Moore. We'll wait for him to be back in his seat before we turn to item. I've got the actual item in front of me without a number. Item 9, which is land bounded by Bradford Street, Birchall Street, Cheapside and the River Ray. When you're ready then, if we can have updates on this item.
Okay, we have received 2 late consultation responses, one from Access Committee who support the provision of accessible housing. They note there is no detail of how this is achieved.
Could you speak up?
Oh, sorry. I'll start again then. We have received 2 late consultation responses, one from the Access Committee team who support the provision of accessible housing here. We also have received a very late objection from the Victorian Society that says the following, which I'll now summarize. I'll read out word for word actually. Whilst we have no objection to the principle of development on this site and note the proposed retention of the facade of the S&K building or building 2, we strongly object to the total demolition of building 1, 54 Bradford Street. In the heritage statement, this building is described as constructed in the 1850s and is occupied by the County Chemical Company. This is inaccurate. The building is clearly referenced in the architectural guide by Andy Foster, page 191, as the number 54 by J.P. Osborne, 1908. Pedimented end bays and off-centre baroque, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, door case. They say, we cannot understand how this error can have occurred. 54 Bradford Street is therefore a notable work by the eminent Birmingham architect John Perrins Osborne, whose buildings include the Grade 2 star listed Alabaster and Wilson Works in Leg Lane of 1892, much of the Grade 2 listed Unity Works in Victoria Street of 1898, Grade 2 listed Erdington Library of 1906 to 1907, Grade 2 listed Oxford Road Baptist Church, Moseley of 1888, and the Grade 2 listed former Hampstead Road Baptist Church of 1883. The building at 54 Bradford Street is worthy of least local listing and should be retained as part of the development on this site. We therefore object to these proposals with the demolition of 54 Bradford Street as currently presented. With regards to this late objection, further comments have been sought from our conservation team who agree that 54 Bradford Street is an early 20th century, bear with me one second.
I think the point is it can't be Victorian if it's after the death of Queen Victoria.
Yeah, do you want me to, I've got it in front of me. The objection from the Victorian Society has been looked at by the conservation team, and they confirmed that it is indeed, the heritage statement is indeed inaccurate as submitted by the applicant, and the building is an early 20th century building and not a mid-19th century building. That said, the building is unlisted and has not been identified for local listing. So in terms of our assessment of this, we must look at paragraph 203 of the NPPF and apply weighting to this heritage asset being affected and make a judgment with regards to the scale of harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. The loss of this building must weigh heavy and be balanced against its not insignificant merits. The value of this building, which is relatively high for a non-designated heritage asset, must therefore be balanced against the wider benefits of this development, and those wider benefits are listed in the report. The value of this building, which is relatively high for a tangible benefits such as flood risk mitigation, unrestricted public access, and landscaping, which are secured in line with the adopted local plan policy, are considered to outweigh the loss of this building. Additionally, conditions over the quality of the execution of the replacement building to ensure a high quality finish are recommended and deemed necessary to mitigate the loss in townscape and setting purposes. So on the one hand, we have the late objection from the Victorian Society, which is pointing out that it's 20th century, not 19th century. We have gone back to the conservation team and they agree that, but they've said nonetheless their recommendation stands. Back to you.
And then finally, in regards to condition 6, there is a slight wording change to the condition to say further back survey required and or mitigation identified. And that's due to an updated back survey. That's it, Chair.
Okay, does anyone wish to speak on this one? I'm not seeing anyone. Having studied the report and heard the updates, are you ready to vote? Can I see those in favour of the application? That's 11 in favour, which is unanimous. Thank you very much. We move on. As I mentioned earlier, items 10 and 11 are for the same location, the Chamberlain buildings on Corporation Street. So in line with our usual practice, we will take the updates and the discussion on the two items, the two reports together, and then we will vote separately on the planning application and the listed building application. Everyone clear? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just the one update to the planning report. That's application 2021/06727/PA, and it's to amend the resolution at paragraph 8.4 after the 28th of December to add in or such later date as may be authorised by officers under delegated powers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak on these applications? No? Again, having studied the report and heard the updates, are you ready to vote? Can I see those then voting in favour on item 10, which is the planning application? That's 11, so that is unanimous. And the listed building application, can I see those in favour? Again, that's 11, so that is unanimous and that is also approved. Thank you. So we're already on item 12, which is other urgent business, which is where I promised we would return to the question of future meetings. And Sean's got a plan. Would you like to share it with us, Sean?
This is just a plan for just in case. Things clearly nationally are moving fairly quickly, and we're seeing changes every day with regard to this latest strain of coronavirus. And so we run the risk that there may be further restrictions put in place that may mean that we can't meet as planned before Christmas or potentially after Christmas. So this is just to cover us for the what if for the next meeting or meetings. Because if we can't meet, the legislation in England doesn't allow us to meet virtually anymore. And so the government would have to put in place legislation to allow that to happen. If they do, and it's done rapidly, then that would deal with it. But if they don't, then we might be caught out without a planning committee. What we have normally in place is the emergency powers to the chair to make decisions if required. So we could fall back on those, and any items that would have been referred to committee could be dealt with the chair. What I'm suggesting as an alternative for you to consider is that you, in the event that meetings are cancelled due to a national lockdown or further restrictions, that you delegate all decisions that would have been going to committee to myself or to the director, for me to make those decisions on your behalf, but in consultation with the committee. Because whilst we can't have a formal meeting of the committee, we could have an informal virtual meeting where you discuss the items and tell me your opinions, and I will take those into account when I make the decision. So I'm putting that forward as a recommendation, as an alternative. And I think it is a backstop, but I think it's useful to have that in place. So if you're happy with that, then that's my recommendation to you.
Anyone got a view on that?
Usual questions.
think it's the best we can do really under the circumstances. Councillor Moore, I'm hoping that you will feel able to make representations about virtual meetings if necessary.
Yeah, I think having the option for the committee to at least discuss the application and hopefully not be sure as to what our views are on applications. I think it's better than particularly when we first went into lockdown and they were done under delegated powers. And I think there was just a brief email exchange at the time before a decision was made. So having a Teams meeting to please discuss, even if we can't make a full decision, at least have an opportunity to say whatever we may wish. The alternative just to be decided about discussion.
It was a very small list that we dealt with like that, and it was minors. We did keep the major applications back to be able to discuss properly, but I take the point. Okay, we will keep you informed. Thanks, Sean.
So
They seem to be happy.
Yes, so I think perhaps we do need a resolution, but as it's a formal delegation of powers. So my recommendation to you is that in the event that planning committee meetings are cancelled due to whatever circumstances we face over the next few weeks, that you delegate the powers to the Assistant Director of Planning, which is me, to take those decisions in consultation with the planning committee.
Can we agree that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other items of urgent business? I'm not seeing any. So item 13 is the authority to chair and officers that in an urgent situation between meetings, the chair jointly with the relevant chief officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Thank you very much. And we have an informal briefing any minute now. We're just waiting for the officer who's going to deal with that. So, yes, I am just about to, I'm just asking people to stay in their seats, asking for members to stay in their seats for that. Okay, thank you. So that concludes the formal meeting for this morning. Thank you all very much.